Yo guys, I hope you're all good and welcome back to another episode of Duncan Shows You right here on the Marin Bikes YouTube channel. As you can see, I'm back on the e-bike, the Alpine Trail E2, and on this week's episode we're going to give you guys 5 tips on how to get better at climbing on your e-bike. So for tip number 1, we're going to look at bike setup, as there's a few subtle things you can do to make things a little bit easier for yourself and get your bike set up just right to give you guys the best possible chance of getting up some of your steepest, hardest climbs. First of all, we're going to look at seat angle and seat height. I would tend to go with the seat angle a little bit lower, because basically what that means is when you start tackling some really steep climbs, it'll be a little bit more level and it'll help you keep your weight over the front and not flipping off the back. You probably don't want to have your seat quite as high as you would on your mountain bike when you're riding your e-bike up tech climbs. Power is not necessarily a limiting factor, and balance and traction and distribution of weight is. So I would tend to opt for something about halfway up from your lowest to highest setting. Tyre choice and tyre setup is also a massive thing when tackling some pretty big climbs. You want to think about your conditions carefully. If you're obviously running in wet, muddy conditions, you might want to look at a mud spike or some sort of intermediate tyre. And then if you're lucky enough to be in some drier climates, you might want to look at a dry tyre, which is going to give you good traction on dry rock and dusty trails. Tip number 2, we're going to look at body position. It is really important that you get your weight distributed correctly over your bike. First of all, to balance, and second of all, to maximise the grip and traction that you're getting out of your back wheel. Like we said in tip number 1, you're going to have your seat at sort of medium height, which keeps your weight quite low. And then on your handlebars, you're basically going to get into almost like a sort of tuck position, which sounds crazy because you're going up a climb, but you're basically trying to balance keeping your weight over the front, as well as putting a lot of weight through your seat and maximising the traction out of your back tyre. It's like a praying mantis position. It's not the most stylish position in the world. You want to kind of have your hands on the handlebars, almost looking over your front wheel, driving as much weight as possible through the seat that's going to press down the back tyre, but at the same time keep as much weight as possible forward to stop yourself flipping off the back. For tip number 3, this is probably the most important one, and I would call it sort of planning ahead and picking a line. It almost seems crazy that you would be doing such a thing in a climb because you're maybe used to going so slow up a climb on your mountain bike, but you almost need to treat the climbs on the e-bike like you would a descent on your regular bike, because everything can happen quite fast, and it's all about keeping your head up and actively looking for what's going to be the sort of path of least resistance. And it means you'll also be able to kind of preempt the gears a little bit. So sometimes that means changing up or down a gear that might not be the best for your exact position that you're in the trail then, but it'll pay off in the long run when you get to that steeper bit and you're already in the right gear, ready to tackle that next gradient. For tip number 4, I'm going to talk about the different power modes and how you can choose them wisely depending on what sort of climb you're tackling. We're running the Shimano EP8 More, which has Eco, Trail and Boost. The Bosch and other ones will have different ones. I guess they're called, say, Turbo for example. And what I'd say is Boost isn't necessarily the best option for every trail and climb that you're doing. Sometimes you actually want a slightly more consistent bit of power. So for example, if I'm going up a kind of steep muddy trail where traction's an issue, it could be appealing to go with Boost or Turbo, but in actual fact it's going to give you just too much power and it'll end up just wheel spinning. So sometimes Trail or even Eco might be better for that. So it's just worth keeping in mind and choose your sort of power mode wisely, and yeah, just remember Boost isn't always best. For tip number 5, we're going to talk about steps, and that could be in the form of actual steps, or it could be rocks or logs within trails and climbs, because they're absolute momentum killers. It's all about getting as much speed as possible and to get up and over it. So again, it kind of comes back to that sort of anticipation thing. So if you see a step in the distance of your climb, you really start need to be thinking ahead and getting the power down and getting the momentum to get you over it. Contrary to what I said in the last point in saying Boost is not always best, when it comes to steps, Boost is definitely your friend, especially if it's a sort of repeated step. Basically what happens is when you're turning your pedals, when you're going up steps, you almost have a kind of dead point in terms of the momentum generation, and the Boost or Turbo mode is going to give you that sort of overdrive, and that'll just kind of tick you over until you're able to get the power down in your next power rotation. So that is going to be really crucial to getting you up and over steps, especially when there's a few of them. That probably looks really easy. That's hard. Whew. I think that's a good thing about e-bikes is, even though it does make going up some climbs easier, it does mean you can tackle certain climbs that you'd never be able to even think about on a regular bike. Oh, that's a workout in the arms as well. So on that note, that is the end of the video. Thanks as always for watching. If you do have any questions about the bike or any of the techniques that we've just talked about, please comment below and either myself or some of the guys at Marin Bikes will be happy to help. We'd also love to hear what you guys like to see us do next. So again, please comment below with some content and video ideas. We'd love to hear them, and we'll catch you guys next time. Peace.